Hi, I'm Katie Glennon with Katie's Homeschool Cottage, and welcome to How to Identify and Meet Your Child's Learning and Thinking Style Needs. As I said, I'm Katie Glennon. I'm a former teacher and homeschool mom with over 30 years in education experience in training in different teaching and learning methods for all kinds of learners. I've graduated 2 boys who are now grown and flown, who had 2 completely different personalities and learning styles, as well as natural interests and skills. So today we're going to look at different kinds of learning and thinking styles, and those include Gregorc Mind styles, thinking and learning, right and left brain thinkers, visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learners. So let's start off with the Gregorc Mind styles. People tend to lean toward a certain type, but they also have others blended in to a degree, especially as they get older. And the objective here is to find the mind style of your child while they're young, cater toward that, but progressively add another type of style a little bit at a time to expose them to different types of learning materials, learning formats, and have them think about that material in different ways and learn it in different ways so that they can adapt and become more well-rounded learners. So the Gregorc Mind style is made up of 2 things. One is the perception ability, and the other is the organizing type. Now, the perception ability is how do the children actually take in and perceive the information? So what is their most comfortable presentation of the information? And that is like, what are the materials, teaching methods we're using, the actual curriculum, their actual learning experience on the outside. That's what the perception ability is. So we're talking about the tangible methods and curriculum choices we make to present the material. That's their perception ability. The other type is the organizing type, and the organizing type is then how do the children then organize this information in their brain once they take that information from the materials, put it in their brain, and how do they process it, think about it, compartmentalize it, organize it in their brain. The perception ability has the concrete and the abstract perception ability, and the organizing types are sequential and random. So let's first take a look at the abstract perception ability or abstract viewpoint. This is, again, the materials on the outside and what is on the outside that lets us know how do they perceive things from the outside. These are your future philosophers, most likely. They can still be good at math, but they like to look at the big picture. They like to work with a big concept or a big idea first and then break it down into smaller pieces and then learn about the details. They love the ideas and concepts. They understand better when a speaker or reading materials state the general topic first, and then you discuss the details that are involved in that general topic. So they like to look at the whole forest to understand that this is a forest. That's a concept. This is a forest. Then you then present, okay, the forest is now made up of all these individual trees. But they want to see the concept first and understand what the concept or the idea is that you're going to start diving into, such as if it's a time period in history, they want to understand, okay, this time period is during this and this. It's between what happened here and what happened here. It is a time period of, let's say, the Civil War. Right? This was a big war, and it was different states were against one another. There were different, supposedly different reasons as to why this war started, what this war was about, and that's presenting the big concept of that time period. Then you can go into the details of what made up that time period. Same thing with the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution happened here. It happened after this, before this, and it was about this. and then you break it down into it. They like to hear or see what it is that they're going to start learning about before you break it into the details. So you can do an overview and then break it into details. They like the big concept at the top, and then they like to gradually break it down into subtopics and then into details, one at a time. Your abstract viewpoint, as I said, are your philosophers. They love asking the why questions. So you might hear, why are we doing this? They want to know the whys. What if? What if this happens? What would happen if this? They love the hypothetical questions. They ask why, not necessarily cause and effects. They don't like the cause and effect, like, oh, well, this happens because of that. It's very philosophical why. Why is he or she doing that? Who knows? Right? And I have a picture of a man down here going, I don't know, like what, why? I can't answer that. There may be no answers to their questions, and this can drive us nuts. They also ask this a lot. They repeat the same kind of questions, maybe with different variations, and they love imagining and visualizing things in their head. Now, your concrete viewpoint, they like to look at the details first, and they like the idea of, okay, this is a tree, this is a tree, this is a tree, this is a tree, and when we put all the trees together, it makes the idea of what's called a whole forest. So they also like taking, and I have a girl here with all these different ideas, and then the main concept is in the middle. This isn't going from the main concept out. This is going from all of the ideas on the outside and then putting them all together to build the concept in the middle. They feel more comfortable and receptive to receiving the details first and then saying, okay, and that makes up the Industrial Revolution. They are your future actuaries or number crunchers, possibly. They are your more literal thinkers as opposed to concepts and ideas. What are the facts? Now let's put them together. They can be science-oriented or math-oriented. They could possibly be your hands-on learners and using their 5 senses because they like that whole concrete, let me see it, let me touch it, let me feel it, let me do something with it idea. They would look at this idea of photosynthesis not by saying, okay, photosynthesis is this. They would look at, okay, so the carbon dioxide is absorbed from the air, then we add water, the plant is using this glucose that's produced, and then they release oxygen into the air, and that's what makes up photosynthesis. That would be your concrete viewpoint. Your abstract viewpoint would be, okay, photosynthesis is, and then give a description of what photosynthesis is and how it helps the leaf and make a little story up about it. And then these are the details and the chemical processes that happen. That would be your abstract. Now, we said that you have the perception abilities and then you have the ordering or the organizing. So now we're working on the inside. We were working on the outside and how are materials and facts presented or concepts presented from the outside for the different types of learners. Now we're talking about, okay, there are 2 different types of organizing. So the first one is the random thinker. This learner bounces from one idea to the next and back to earlier ideas in a random order. They brainstorm ideas in a scattered fashion. They like to use mind maps and bubble clusters, such as the one over here to the left, to jot down ideas. They write down notes in margins in all different directions, and their notes may look very messy. They enjoy bullet journals, where, it's instead of a strict planner, they like to just write ideas down in a journal, or they like to doodle. They might be your messy learner, your messy workspace, and they can be impulsive. So they may have the bubble clusters where they have the main idea in the middle, and then they like to write out different ideas that come to mind in the outside bubbles. Their bulletin board with their sticky notes may look like this with the Post-its, and their bookcase on the left-hand corner, bottom left-hand corner may look like that. Now, your sequential organizer or thinker is pretty much the opposite. They like to do and think about things in steps, lists, outlines. They're very organized. They brainstorm in an organized and orderly fashion. It's this and then this and this. Likes to use Roman numeral or numbered outlines. They write down notes in a neat list. They're a linear thinker where they like to see things moving along a number line or a timeline. They're neat and systematic learners and planners. And they tend to think like the pictures on the left here. So from one idea to the next going down, to the next going down, also with numbers, again, listed 1 and 2, nice and neat. And then with the checklist on the clipboard, you have an itemized checklist here with a space to check things off as you work on them. So they are very orderly in their thinking. So once you give them information, it is processed very orderly and compartmentalized. Now, to give you an example of how this works in real life, I was an English teacher. My husband was a science teacher. We met while we were teaching. My desk usually looked like this on the top left-hand corner. I was constantly grading essays. I had 6 different classes, so I had different essays going on at all different times. So I would use different folders and file folders and binder clips and notebooks to keep everything organized, but it was stacked in this manner, and it was the nature of my work. So it looked pretty messy to someone like my husband, but I knew where everything was. My classroom would also have plants in it, and it would have posters and such on the wall and decorated, and I'd have maybe grammar rules or pictures from different novels and things like that on the walls. My husband, his desk looked like that. He would take out his science textbook. He would write notes to his class. Every Monday they would take notes. Every Tuesday they would go over discussion questions on the chapter they were reading. On Wednesdays they would do an experiment. On Thursdays they would do a quiz. On Fridays they would do some sort of activity or film strip or video or movie, something like that for review. In my class we had units, but every day was different. His bulletin board has index cards on it lined up in a row like this. My notes are usually on a bulletin board with sticky notes similar to this, where if I get an idea to write down, I would jot it down and just pin it up there. My brain on the bottom left-hand corner these are all the ideas going on in my head all at one time, and I have to get them out on paper in order to be able to organize them. My husband, with the little man and his one thought at a time, is over here on the right-hand bottom corner. Our children tended to be, my oldest is now a corporate security software salesman. He is an abstract random like I am. Software security sales sounds like it would be technical. However, when you're selling it, you're describing the big overall concept with some of the details to the people he's talking to. He's not a programmer. My younger son is more of a concrete random. So because he was concrete, he was very mathy, but again, he wasn't quite as sequential as my husband. So he was more concrete random because he did like to think visually and conceptually, even though he was very good with math. He is in the commercial housing procurement officer. So you can see we have a very interesting household. And you'll notice probably that yours is similar. Now, do you have a random or a sequential thinker? Let's think about this for a second. An idea would be to try placing books or magazines on a coffee table in a fan or scattered kind of design across the table. Ask your child, and you can even do this with your spouse, if the books look okay to them or the magazines look okay or they need to be placed differently. If the person leaves them the way they are and thinks it's fine, or puts them in some kind of like fan design or something that's just sort of scattered, then most likely you have more of a random thinker. If they move them into stacks or evenly place them like mathematically spaced out, you most likely have a sequential thinker. Another idea would be to find a messy bookcase or a messy closet. Ask your child to straighten the bookcase so that all of the books are neatly arranged, or clean out the closet and put everything in a certain place in the closet. Don't give them specific instructions on how to do it, just ask them to do it. Then watch your child work. Do they work one shelf at a time and neatly place the books, or do they take one section at a time and just deal with that section and then move on to the next section or the next shelf? Or do they take everything off the shelves or out of the closet and put it all back as they work? If they do it in a sequential manner, you most likely have a sequential thinker. If they do it one section at a time. If they do it where they take everything off the shelves and they put everything back in a way that makes sense to them, it's more likely a random thinker. Now, you have a possible perception and ordering combination. Now, up here you have abstract sequential, which means they're the big concept idea thinker, but they think about it in a sequential manner. You have abstract random, where again it's the big concepts, but they think about things randomly. Concrete sequential is details, facts, and sequentially means they think about them organized. And then concrete, again, details and facts, but they think about them randomly. And we're going to look at these in a detailed way. So your concrete sequential learner, these are the ones that learn like the details and the facts. This would be my husband, concrete sequential. He was very sciencey, detailed, fact, has to everything be in a certain order and a certain sequence. They're not the big on endless what if questions. They like to dwell in the here and now, what they can touch and see, no big concepts or ideas. They tend to be literal thinkers. They like to see the trees or the details first and how they add up to make the forest or build up to the concept. Because they are sequential, they're organized, linear thinkers, and they like facts presented in an organized manner. They're stable, productive, and they tend to be sometimes perfectionists. Now, how do you teach someone like this? Well, you teach it, or a homeschool parent, if you want to identify who you are, you need to understand who you are and how you like things, but you also need to look at how your child is so that you can adapt yourself to what they're going to learn best with. So if you're the concrete sequential type where you need to have a very sequential program and everything is dictated for you step by step, minute by minute, tight schedule, and it's all textbook, workbook, worksheets, then you need to start looking at your child and see, does that work for them, or do they constantly complain and fight it? Because you may not have a concrete sequential learner. You might have an abstract random who's totally bored out of their mind and they can't stand it. So the parent has to adapt a little bit more than the child. So we need to look to see if is this the way we like to teach, and that is our comfort zone, or is this going to work for our child? So the concrete sequential person is very organized, detailed. They need instructional programs with guidebooks, detailed lesson plans, workbooks, worksheets, lab manuals, textbooks with quizzes and tests. Everything is just laid out for them, and it's step by step by step. Hands-on experiences, that's the concrete person. Organized field trips. Now, field trips can seem kind of random, but if they are hands-on, they are like concrete for your child to see, but they have to be organized because of their sequential learning. Abeka and BJU Press are textbook oriented. They also have the video online components now. Sequential math programs like Saxon Math might be suited toward them. Exact directions, guided practice when learning new skills. Sit with them and let them practice some of these math problems with you step by step. Don't just show it to them and then expect them to be able to sit there and do it. You have to sit with them and have guided practice. Get the graph paper out, helps them organize and line up their math problems. I actually recommend this for everybody for math, especially your abstract random. They may not like the idea, but it helps them line up all the numbers whenever they're doing math problems, because with abstract random especially, their math problems end up looking like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. So the graph paper helps line those up. concrete sequential, written schedules, planners, timers, progress trackers, checklists with reward systems, you've got it going on. But if your child is not geared toward that, it does not work for them. Regular reviews and repetition, keep workspace neat and distraction free. Your concrete random still likes the facts and details, likes the here and now, likes to see what they're doing. They don't dwell on the what if questions. They tend to be literal thinkers. However, even though they like to see the details and they add the details up to make the forest or build up the concept, they're random in the way they think and deal with this. So they can be impulsive and impatient sometimes, they can be spontaneous, flexible, and they may appear disorganized. These are the learners who like hands-on games and activities because they can be open-ended. And again, it's concrete because it's hands-on, but it's not close-ended, step-by-step. This is what it's going to be when we're finished. They like projects because of the concrete side, but they like them open-ended, where they're exploring what it's going to end up being. That's the random side. STEM-focused, mystery science, Tinker Crate, Legos, engineering kits, robotics, hands-on manipulatives, math programs such as Math-U-See, Winston Grammar's hands-on. That's the concrete side. Random side is the rabbit trails and spontaneously following a topic they find interesting. That's where maybe nature study comes in because it's hands-on, but it's open-ended. Simulations, that's their concrete side, acting things out, but leaving the end results open where it's not a script, but they can figure it out. That's the random side. Trial and error is the random side. Using science experiments is the concrete side. But if you leave it open to find out what the results of that experiment are, that's the random side. If you want to have, a dictated science experiment that's step by step by step, and you have to get these certain results, that would be concrete sequential because it's a close-ended result. Abstract sequential learners, again, the abstract likes the big idea. These learners think about the concepts, they're visionary, they look at the forest, not the trees, they're your what-if thinkers. And they ask variations of that question, but not in a random conversation. Abstract randoms will go on and keep talking forever about all the different what-ifs. An abstract sequential will ask the what-ifs, but they want to narrow it down to a conclusion. Because they're sequential, they're precise, and they like the conclusion. They like the ending. They need the closure. They like their ideas, but in an organized manner. Now, what do we do with them? Well, we can let them pick out maybe research ideas, or we give them a topic. They like to research, that's their abstract research ideas, but because of the sequential, you need to give them some sort of organized format or structure to follow, or some sort of checklist to follow where they have to complete this part, this part, this part, and this part. For instance, I used to use a lot of combinations in my classroom and as well as my students, my kids, and in homeschool co-ops and at home with my kids. For a research project, they would include a hands-on project as well as a written research component and a oral presentation. So I was trying to include all different types of learning activities for all different types of learners in one project. Sometimes if the learner needed more specific details as to what it needed in it, that would be the sequential or the concrete student. An abstract random or an abstract sequential, you could give them a little bit more room to explore. So the ideas are in an organized manner for the sequential, but because it's researching ideas and you're giving them access to the encyclopedia or reference materials, you're dealing with the abstract. You're letting them explore these ideas. Concrete, they're not into the ideas. They want something hands-on and more textbooky. They enjoy lectures, books such as historic novels, biographies. They can learn history that way. They like a syllabus to follow because of the sequential. They like guided study. They also like the Socratic dialogue with the ideas leading to a conclusion, debates where they can logically take ideas and come to a conclusion or argue a conclusion. It's not open-ended, so that makes that sequential. Abstract is all of the arguing and the discussing of the ideas. Classical education is a good fit for them because of the sequential. Well-trained mind, classical conversations, logical and critical thinking programs because of the abstract and the sequential. Essays and analytical writing, concept mapping and outlines, research journals, essay templates, all of these are great for an abstract sequential. Online courses with structured progression are also good for abstract sequential. Now, an abstract random, these learners like their ideas and their concepts, remember, because of the abstract, story-based telling, the what-ifs, lots of possibilities of things, but because they're random, they could go on and on and on and on and never come up with a conclusion, and they're just happy talking about it. They don't need an answer. They just want to talk about it. They love the group discussions or role-playing. The random side is spontaneous, not like the sequential. They can go on and on with open-ended possibilities, and they're perfectly happy. It may drive you nuts, but they're perfectly happy. They're flexible, delight-directed learners. They make emotional connections to the content that they're reading and learning about. So if you have those emotional connections you can pull out in history and literature, it makes more of an impression on them in their learning. Multisensory activities such as music, color, texture, all of it. They love it. Now take in mind, though, your child's personality, because sometimes your abstract randoms, they learn this way. However, maybe their personality needs to have some sort of structure in place. Otherwise, they'll keep going on one thing and never get back to what they need to get done. So you need to sort of rein them in and give them maybe a basic daily routine to follow. We followed a loose routine in our house. We had subject areas we had to finish each day, and they knew they had to get it done by, a certain time to be able to have time to do something else at the end of the day. We didn't have a timed schedule. We didn't have a bunch of detailed checklists. It was usually one at a time. Okay, we need to get this done. Sometimes it was reining in a horse, trying to keep them on schedule, but they enjoyed the learning and they retained it. Now, your abstract random teaching and learning ideas, again, your rabbit trails, Charlotte Mason method, unit studies, literature, or theme-based learning, art and music integrated into the curricula. You can do this with your unit studies. As I said, emotion-rich stories and biographies, they connect those lessons to real-life relationships and feelings. Using analogies in order for them to understand concepts and comparing it to things works very well. Group work and socialization, co-op learning, reflection time, open-ended exploration, audiobooks, visual aids, craft and sensory materials, all of that works very well with your abstract random. Now remember, we want flexible thinkers and learners. We don't just want to focus solely on delivering materials and having them learn materials just in their strong suit. So as you go through your homeschooling, you want to give them an opportunity here and there to become more flexible with some type of learning material that is not according to their perception or their organizing learner, and help them to adapt to the different presentations of information and using it in different ways. They may show prominent tendencies, but they'll become more balanced and adaptable to learning and thinking in different ways. Now, we're going to take a look at your left and right brain thinker. I don't really look at this as much as I look at the Gregorc or the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, which we're about to look at, because I find that it can be a lot more difficult to identify your learner with left brain and right brain. My kids, they contradicted themselves all the time. If I were to try to identify them as a left brain or right brain learner to try to help me figure out how to present material, how they think about it, I wouldn't be able to do it. It was too confusing. But The main idea is that left brain learners usually think logically, linear, and detailed focused. That sounds more like our concrete and our sequential. Thrive on structure, step by step. They excel in phonics, spelling, grammar, and math rules, and they follow the rules. They prefer verbal or written instructions. They love rules and routines, tend to be analytical and objective. They often do well with standardized tests. They sound very rigid in their thinking and their learning. Parents tend to follow instructions closely, likes making lists and schedules, finish tasks in a specific sequence. They enjoy logic games, puzzles, word problems, and they notice details that others may miss. Now, the right brain thinker thinks more creatively, visually, and holistically. They use creativity and imagination. They learn through visual, storytelling, hands-on activities, art, music, drama, big picture concept. They struggle with memorization unless it has meaning or rhythm, and they often are seen as intuitive, emotional, or expressive. And right brain parents, they tend to draw or doodle while taking notes. They love being creative and acting, exploring ideas, and they get frustrated with rigid schedules and too much repetition. So that's an overview of those two. Now, you might have a left or right brain thinker if, here's a left brain, prefers facts and logic, loves music, movement, and drama. You have a right brain thinker. Writes and reads early, left brain thinker, struggles with phonics, right brain thinker, likes structure and routine, left brain thinker, dislikes repetition or drill, right brain, thinks in images or colors, right brain, enjoys independent quiet work, left brain, and tells stories, makes sounds effects, or acts out ideas, right brain. And as I said, both my guys had a crossover of some of these. Now, if you want to look at the left brain, and you're pretty sure you have a left brain learner, again, look at structured curriculum with very clear expectations, more like a concrete sequential. Emphasize the phonics, grammar rules, and math facts. Give time for independent quiet work. Use textbooks and worksheets, memorization, things like Saxon Math, Rod and Staff English textbooks, Abeka, BJU textbooks, and curriculum work well. Right brain, again, use the visual aids, charts, color coding, illustrations, multisensory, rhymes, songs, games, flexible schedules, creative assignments. Minimize the rote drills, focus on meaningful learning experiences. You might look at Right Start Math that has visual and hands-on, all about reading, all about spelling is multisensory. Math You See is also video and manipulatives. And if you have a right brain thinker who has a really hard time memorizing math facts such as the multiplication tables and division problems because they're not rote memory thinkers, and this goes for even if you don't know if they're right-brained or not, go to dianecraft.org and look at their materials for right brain learners. I had a learner who had a really hard time with memorizing multiplication tables. I ordered huge flashcards with characters in the numbers, and on the back of the flashcard it had a little story about these characters and these numbers, and the story made a connection for my learner so that they were able to memorize that 3 times 4 equals 12 because of the character in 3 and the character in 4, and it multiplied up to 12. And they remembered the story and made a connection, and they were actually able to memorize their math facts that way. So if you have a learner that tends to be like that, check out her materials. It's worth it. Now, your visual and auditory kinesthetic learners. Now, this will give you more an indication as to what materials to use, and then I would go back to the Gregorc Mind style and think about what you learned from about which could be your learner from those and combine it with the visual or the auditory or the kinesthetic. The visual learners, they make up about 65% of the population. They absorb and retain information best when it's presented through visual means, pictures, charts, diagrams, written instructions. Auditory learners make up about 30% of the population, and they understand and retain information when they hear it. They thrive on discussions, verbal instructions, and sound-based resources, hearing things. And these are the learners where you could be talking to them and talking about something, and they may be looking around the room talking, and it drives you nuts thinking they're not paying attention. Stop and ask them, could you please just tell me what I just said to you? And if they can tell you back what you just were talking about with them, then you have more likely an auditory learner. Kinesthetic learners are hands-on learners. They love the Legos, they love the science experiments, they love the robot kits, that kind of thing. They love building things, they love the crafts. They need hands-on experiences and movement to understand concepts fully. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. Your visual learner, like I said, likes to read, look at pictures, remembers faces better than names. When one of my children were younger, I would say, "Oh, you met a new friend today. What was his name?" "Oh, well, I don't remember, but he was wearing a red shirt and he had red hair and he had freckles," and he could remember visually everything, but because he heard the name, he couldn't remember the name. And that was me as a teacher. I had to have nameplates on my kids' desks for the first half of the year to be able to remember their name, because I could match the visual written name with their face. They enjoy drawing, doodling, or watching videos. They find it easier to follow written directions than spoken ones. So it's always good to have them or you point to the directions on a piece of paper while you read them and have them follow along with their eyes if they are a visual learner. You give them directions orally, they will not remember. Using a whiteboard or a visual schedule, incorporating color coding and highlighters. This is great if you are trying to memorize the math facts or trying to use sight words or trying to remember certain sounds that letters make on flashcards, that kind of thing. You can color code it in a highlight color and it stands out for them and it helps them. Let them summarize readings with visuals. So again, if you're doing a sequential story, it helps to have pictures of the story. Let them sequence the story through visual flashcard type things, or have them draw a picture of what they just heard and read with you. And then if you want to have them start writing a story, have them draw the picture of what the story was about, and then have them write sentences about what it was about. That's how we started writing, using notebook pages. Visual learners, you want to use illustrated textbooks and workbooks, educational videos and documentaries, things they can see, slide presentations such as PowerPoint, storyboards, comic strips, textbooks such as Apology of Science with colorful textbooks and diagrams, teaching textbooks where it's visual and step-by-step explanation, and visual Latin for Latin learners. The auditory enjoys talking and storytelling. They will talk to themselves while they're learning. They will repeat what they're learning. This is how they remember. So if you are getting maybe kind of, tired of listening to them talking, this is how they actually process information and that they learn and memorize information. So the more they talk about it, you can be assured that they are actually learning it. They can be distracted by other noises around them, but to calm them down, you can have them listen to music, and that is a great effect on them. They ask a lot of questions to clarify their own understanding. Read instructions aloud before beginning. Don't just say, read the instructions and work. Read it aloud with them. Let them explain what they're learning verbally to you. Discuss your lessons together. Listen to them. Ask them, what did you get out of this? They love talking about it. Use music or rhythm to teach memorization. My son, who is auditory, he learned his math facts through rhymes, grammar rules through rhymes, and music, capitals to the different states through music. He loved it. Use audiobooks, podcasts, voice recordings, narrated presentations, oral reading and reading alouds, and also books on tape, songs, chants, rhymes, discussion-based lessons or Socratic questioning, echo reading or repeat after me activities are great. There's audio recordings of Story of the World history. My son loved listening to those. Sunlight curriculum is heavy on read alouds of books and discussion. Classical conversation is also with group discussion, and singing grammar or grammar songs are great. Your kinesthetic learner is the hands-on learner. Again, they're only 5% of the population. They prefer doing experiments or building things, struggle with sitting still for long periods of time. They may be tapping or doing fidgets during your lectures or reading time, so give them something to hold while they're listening. Enjoy physical activities and games. They remember things through muscle memory and movement. When they're young, they might learn the letters of the alphabet by shaping them with their body, numbers with their body, maybe big arm movements and having them make the letters or numbers with their arms. So it's big movements, muscle memory, to help them remember things. That helps with them. Using hands-on demonstrations for new topics, break up the seat work with movement breaks, let them act out scenes or build models, use real objects or field trips to reinforce learning, and again, allow fidget tools during reading or lessons. Recommended materials are definitely manipulatives: math cubes, letter tiles, models, science kits and experiments, building tools, physical games and role play, nature journal, and scavenger hunts. You can learn science through nature and be outside. Activity-based printables. Curriculum suggestions would include Right Start Math, because it's got the manipulatives, as well as Math UC. Mystery Science includes hands-on experiments. So where do we go from here? I know that was a lot of information. So it might be best to look at, as I said, the Gregorc Mind styles and combine that with whether your child appears to be visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. Then we want to choose the methods and materials that best meets their needs, not ours, but also at the same time remember to once in a while introduce a learning material or a chance to process something differently than the way they're used to, either leaving something open-ended or something that is a conclusion that they have to come to, a close-ended, to get rid of, get rid of maybe closed-mindedness for the sequential thinker who always needs that same conclusion at the time. They need the ending. Let them experience an open-ended experience. The random thinker who feels too constricted, give them an ending that they have to come to. Let them think about how they're supposed to get there. But do this occasionally where they can learn to adapt. Now, you also want to make sure you download and use the swag bag gift titled Teaching Tips for Different Mind and Learning Styles. It has a review of what we put in this video. But if you are a VIP pass holder, you can also download the swag bag gift, but you'll also make sure you want to make sure you download the VIP bonus, which has a guide to teaching methods and curriculum choices for your child's mind and learning styles. And this has more details as to teaching methods, techniques, and links with more curriculum that will match your child's learning styles. And you want to make sure to come and visit me, where I have materials that meet all of the different learning styles. I have everything from literature studies to nature studies to helps for parents to writing lessons to unit studies. And I make sure to include activities in all of these that meet the different learners' needs. Where to visit me? katieshomeschoolcottage.com. You can find me on Facebook at Katie's Homeschool Cottage. My Facebook group is Homeschool Mom's Corner. Visit me at Pinterest as well at Katie's HS Cottage, Instagram, Katie's Homeschool Cottage, and my YouTube channel. So I hope you come by and see me. I'd love to have you. One last thought. If a child can't learn the way we teach, maybe we should teach the way they learn. Thanks for joining me, and I look forward to having you as part of my community, hopefully. And make sure to get those ebooks that will help you find your child's learning style and what will best suit their learning needs.